All right. Well, the little icon in the top corner of my screen says live. So guess what, guys?
We're live.
We're live. Welcome to the Rundown, episode 12. Alan, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm doing good. A little stressed out, but I'm all right.
Why are you stressed out?
I'm going to see my grandkids in Tajikistan tomorrow morning.
Okay. Is that in Wyoming?
That is next to China and Afghanistan.
All right. That's one of the many stand countries that we never learned about in geography.
Yes.
Hey, I'm going to hop over to LinkedIn. I want to make sure our feed's live, so I'm going to disappear for a quick second and mute myself so we don't get weird feedback loops. Be right back.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
So I got in trouble last night because I ate a kid's meal at McDonald's. His mom was not happy.
Oh gosh.
Was that mom your daughter?
No, I haven't seen her yet. That's in a couple days. Ken, where are you flying to?
I'm heading to the Philippines actually with Sean.
All right.
90 degrees and 90% humidity. Looking forward to it.
Nice.
I'm going to the snow.
How long of a flight is it to the Philippines?
The direction I'm going, really long. Last time we flew west. This time we're flying east and hopping through Qatar and then on to Manila. So it is it's approaching 20 hours of flight time, I think.
Yeah, there's no fast way. I was looking at Manila or Kuala Lumpur in April or May, and basically the only it's 30 hours, 35-hour trip no matter what, and It's just a hard place to get to as far as from the U.S. There's no fast way.
I think you'd almost be better just put the hang glider up, right, and let the Earth turn underneath of you, because that's only 24 hours, right, to go the whole way around. How that works, I'm not an engineer for that kind of stuff, but.
Oh, all right. Well, hey, introductions for everybody. If you were on to our audience, if you're on Virtual Workshop last week, you've met these guys, except we've subbed Ken Wyatt with Canary out for Sean. Ken originally was on the project, got caught on the road for work, and couldn't be with us, so Sean stepped up last week. So officially welcome, Ken. This is your first Virtual Workshop or Rundown, right?
It is. I'm a rookie, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
I just hope there's no initiation process, like.
Well, there is, Ken. So actually, I guess real quick, Ken, give since you are completely new to the group, tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into industrial automation, and throw in some dad jokes while you're doing it.
Ooh, yeah. So Ken Wyatt, I've been at Canary 11 years yesterday, maybe.
Wow.
Started out as a software engineer here. Somehow I've transitioned into director of business solutions. I do work with a lot of our largest customers on integrations, implementations, architecture, and so I kind of crossed multiple boundaries. Just stumbled into the automation world, I guess. I actually come from a healthcare background. I did healthcare software for 16 years, and it is not a fun place to be. And so I was looking for something different and knew nothing about historians, automation, PLCs, and all the other good acronyms that get thrown around in this industry. So learned a ton. We work with a lot of oil and gas, a lot of solar customers. So while I don't have a degree in engineering for those industries, I somehow learned how to speak it and can fake it pretty good. So dad jokes, wow, I wasn't prepared, but I do have a couple grandsons. They unfortunately live about 12 hours away, and my one grandson, he's more of a homebody. He doesn't like going outside, and part of that is because they have this huge oak tree in their backyard, and every time he goes outside, he gets a little scared. So if we're down visiting, he's like, "Hey, Opa, can you come out to the backyard with me?" He goes, "I don't really trust this tree." I'm like, "What do you mean you don't trust this tree?" He's like, "Yeah, it looks a little shady."
Wow, that's not
So-
bad, Ken.
Yeah, so I don't have a dad joke. I have a granddad joke. Is that
Yes.
acceptable?
That's good. That's good.
I'm a little nervous about going back to the airport because the last time I went to the airport, there was a lady who completely passed out right by the carousel. She eventually came around.
Mhm.
Oh, that got David. You like that one?
It's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let's talk about the project last week, guys. I apologize to Phoenix Contact. I don't know why on earth this is behaving this way, but look here. When I bring up the graphic from last week, Software Toolbox right there in the middle, SAP, Canary on the outside edge. Phoenix Contact is hiding. You're shy today, PLCnext. Why are you hiding over here on the edge? Let's talk about last week. Hey, we two things happened. We discussed for the first time publicly this concept of the unified analytics framework, and then we actually plugged our vendors into that framework and ran a pretty cool project that bypassed that traditional way of getting data from ERP to site through MES or maybe through some type of a SQL database, and automated the sharing of that information. And then, of course, we then completed the loop by taking what was happening at the PLC, historizing it to Canary, feeding it back through the UAF and up to our SAP instance. So let's talk through it. What did you see that kind of was, hey, I can't believe this was this easy? What were you thinking, like, why would we not do it this way? Why would we do it this way? Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I'll kick us off from an end user standpoint, and one that has struggled with SAP for most of my career, at least half of my career, I'd say. And the reality of being able to know that you have a connector that is certified, that I can pass data back and forth to my control system, and I can do it, meeting the security I need to meet. That is something I wish I'd have known 10 years ago, because the majority has always been manual, right? Dump it into a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet or some kind of report, hand it off to a guy, and then, or send it via email, and then he's importing that stuff into the control system space manually.
Yeah, Alan, I can actually attest to that. I was on a meeting yesterday, and it didn't have to do with our production, but it was just pulling data from SAP to update a website. And it was almost like we started the conversation and everybody involved was just like, why are we doing this? And I literally said, last week we showed SAP directly connecting to a PLC. And everybody, I think they took it as like an insult. And I was like, well, I just wanted to let you know that, it doesn't have to be this terrible every time we do anything with it. And it's one of those things where, like you said, 10 years ago, even a year ago, I think people would have just straight out just told you no. Like, you're going to take this, here's the clipboard, and here's all your data, and you go put it in whatever system you wanted it to be in, or manually enter it. And now that's not the case. We have a use case right now where you can do that automatically.
Anybody else? Wen, David, your experiences?
Yeah, I'll say that we did end up we did a lot of work getting up to last Wednesday, and everything said it supported OPC UA between the PLC and Canary, and I think that one of the lessons that I learned, because I was acting as the integrator, essentially putting this all together, and I really got to feel what the integrator feels, where it's like, oh yeah, they all say they have compatible specs, but a spec on a checkbox on a spec sheet is different than actual real life specs. And we ran into that live. We fixed it, or not live, but days running up to the event. We fixed it the day before, and I just want to say I felt what integrators feel, where they're on a job site. Everything should work because it all says it should work, functionally speaking. But it's about the little nuances that they run into at the time of implementation that then bite them, and that having to inaudible very quickly to get that fix in place. So that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, is just getting to feel what the integrator feels on site at the time. So
yeah, that's good. David, how about for you?
So from my perspective, and I mean, Zach has hit the nail on the head. I, from a previous part of my life, has been involved in this whole MES environment, and the whole integration into the enterprise, specifically SAP and some other products also, has always been a contentious issue. So the takeaway that I just have is, having built this, and obviously we shouldn't forget about our technical resources sitting in the background, and kudos to them because they've done a phenomenal job at Software Toolbox in order to assist us to show the audience of how easy it is to do this. But it opens up possibilities. I mean, it's just that thing of saying, yesterday this wasn't possible, today it is possible with the technology that's out there. What's going to happen tomorrow? And it makes you think different. And I think that's the exciting part that takes us into the future. And I can't wait to see what the future is actually going to deliver.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions around the Software Toolbox connector. How long has it been out? So when was it available? And what has changed with it as far as, is OPC new to that feature?
I'll field this one. Software Toolbox has been selling OPC Router since 2019, so it's actually our youngest, or one of our youngest products that we offer. It came out of an integrator who was doing integration work and didn't find the right solution to do certain integrations. So they built OPC Router, and over time they put different pieces on it. So it started with OPC, and then it grew from there. So SAP was one of the more later add-ons, but it's been there since 2019 when we got it. But it started around OPC and moving data to databases and other things, and slowly grew. One of the things that I find pretty fascinating about it is, I would say nearly half of our users are doing SAP integration with Router. There's a lot of use cases for Router, but it seems to be that SAP is a very, very popular use case because of how easy it is with Router.
And how complicated it is to get data in and out of SAP.
In general, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. And so when did the SAP connector get certified? Was that prior to 2019?
Yeah, we're using a certified connector. So we chose a connector that was certified so that we could also be certified. That's the easy way to do it, right?
I think one of the really cool things that came out of that last week for me was seeing that because OPC Router is certified, right? Now all of a sudden, like Ken and the team at Canary can develop, make a connection to OPC Router with their API, and now they have a certified connection into SAP for their customers. Ken, what was that effort like on your part? I know you were basically between different jobs trying to just squeeze that in on the side. You've been a busy guy. What was the lift?
Yeah, it actually was nothing out of the ordinary, So, the simplest case was, I created a virtual view on our system that, kind of narrowed down the scope of what tags we wanted to expose, and then simply wrote, a REST query against our API to be able to query, the data that we were after, related to inventory in this case, but could be anything. So. No real custom programming. It was all out of the box querying, and just a matter of setting the query parameters based on how the data was to be aggregated, or if it was to be raw data. So honestly, once I got OPC Router up and running, to get the data out of our system and kind of parse the JSON a little bit, as a test. Maybe 30 minutes of effort to get the query set up and running the way we needed it to.
All right, let's do a little exercise. This is, I'm going to put you on the spot. You guys had no idea I was going to do this. I didn't know I was going to do this until 30 seconds ago. Let's walk an audience member who's never seen how a historian like Canary's API works. Let's just kind of give them, in 3 minutes, let's give them the walkthrough on it. All right.
Sure.
Canary's got all of their API documentation online. So if I do read api.canarylabs.com.
Looks like you've been there before.
I've been there a few times. All right. So what is the actual methodology that we would need to do, right? What's the very first thing someone's going to do?
So it was actually just a single query, single call that we did. So we used get tag data 2, which is towards the bottom of your screen.
Okay. Don't need to use your token or anything like that first? You
don't anymore, no. Initially, it was a multi-step process, but to integrate with third-party tools, we do a lot of work with customers that use Spotfire, Power BI, Tableau, whatever their tool of choice is. Having a multi-step process was a little cumbersome and not very REST-like, and so we've added the concept of an access token that they can define on our view service, which is just a GUID that's tied to a user account for authentication and security purposes. And so through get tag data 2, we simply need to include an access token as part of that call, and there's no two-step authentication.
Cool. That's news to me. It's changed since I was familiar with it. So basically, from this one call, it looks like I can either go grab raw data, or I can pass in. So I'm going to define my time period, start time, end time. If I don't define start time, end time, do I just get last known?
That is correct. Yeah. You get the last value in the database. Yes.
Okay. And if I define start time, end time, I could get a series of raw values, or I could also define an aggregate name, an aggregate interval, and then I'm going to get process data. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Cool. And you can start at a particular view, a path within the view. I believe what we did, we started at the top level of a view and then provided, there's a search parameter. And so you can actually specify multiple search criteria to narrow down and collect all the tags at once. So rather than having to do, a browse on just the structure to get all the tags that you want to return, we can do the browsing and querying, filtering at the same time as returning data.
And then the response essentially is in an array of arrays, right? So if multiple tags and then an array of TVQs for each of the time periods or each of the timestamps, I guess is the way to say it.
Right. Correct.
And potential continuation. If there's, did I see that?
Potentially, if there's more than 1 million data values returned. So unlikely. That's another advantage of get tag data 2 is we've expanded the response and the number of records that we can return. Internet and connectivity is much better than when we built the API in the early days, which I don't even know. We've had the API since 2016, 2017 maybe. So, and it was quite limiting in the number of responses or values we'd return, and we've really opened that up to really allow large data ingestion out of our system.
Okay, so I bring all this up just a little bit because it's that open unlicensed API, right? That is essentially creating this free flow of data back into this architecture. At the end of the day, that's one of the things that you need from a database like a historian. That's why Canary fits so well into this community, because of that openness mentality, right? That if it's in Canary, it should be made available to other things through an unlicensed, free to use, powerful API. And so that's essentially what we've used in this demonstration to get back over to OPC Router. And then OPC Router is that SAP certified connectivity point. Yeah. So when wearing the hat of the integrator this week, if there's an integrator listening to this and they've not worked with OPC Router, they've not worked with PLCnext, but they know SAP.
Sure.
What would be the amount of hours that they would expect to spend to do exactly to do it exactly the way that we did it? What's a realistic estimation?
Sure. So, let's just assume the RFC calls are made in SAP because this guy's an expert, so he knows how to do that. That's already done. Really, you just need to know what PLC tags you want to push to SAP. Make sure you have an OPC access to that or some access to that. That's as simple as browsing for OPC tags and then mapping them to your RFC connection. David, what do you say? A couple hours worth of work, and that's, that might be a little low if you want to do validation and ultimately some factory acceptance testing and all. But, you should be able to get it up and running in less than 30 minutes.
I kind of agree. I think that the planning, it's this 80-20 rule where you got to plan for 80% of the time you plan to actually implement, and 20% is the configuration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the environment that allows you that to literally just fill in the blanks and draw a few lines, which is the power of this visual workflow tool called Router, and receiving and sending data to different sources and destinations. So plan first before you do. I think that's the key from an integrator point of view.
The other thing that was nice while we were working on this project that I want to add is it's really easy to move pieces of OPC Router around between different people and projects. So you can right click on an object in Router and copy it, and you get an XML output that you can then paste into another router, or you can import and export certain connections and workflows, and all of that can be picked to the minute detail you want to share with someone. So, I can create something for David, share with him, he can import it into his router, and then we could share that with Ken if we needed to.
Well, that's exactly what Ken did. Is I said, Ken, please export, and we imported what Ken did, and that's how we continued with the JSON parsing and just making it into variables to get it into SAP. So Ken did all the hard lifting, and thank you for that.
I just want to say to the audience, that's extremely incredible saying 30 minutes. And I think you're being quite conservative there with 30 minutes. I think you could do it pretty fast. If someone gave me a project like this and I was the project manager on it and they said, hey, we want to make this connection happen, what is the time frame for it? I would probably ballpark 40 to 100 hours, man hours, trying to say like, okay, I have a team of 3 people. That's about a week's worth of work, to try and make this connection happen. And then you have support afterwards of like when it doesn't work after the first, week, or someone makes one variable change and nothing happens. So 30 minutes versus, 40 to 100 man hours is an incredible delta, in just the ability to connect this data easily.
Yeah. Well, let's say it doesn't work right away. Right. So got to call Software Toolbox. Your support team's there to, right. You're there. You pick up. One of the things I like is if I call Software Toolbox when this is over, it's going to be 3 rings. I'm going to be talking to somebody.
An engineer as well. Yeah. Not just somebody, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's good. Well said. So maybe there's something wrong in my environment. Maybe you help me troubleshoot that. So maybe I'm in it for an hour on the OPC Router side. You've got, Ken, are you guys going to post, is there going to be anywhere that the Canary API connectivity to OPC Routers made available? So I could just, if I had Canary, I could just take what you've done?
I'm sure we could, yeah. We hadn't really discussed that, but be easy enough.
Now, Ken.
Canary's got a Git. You could just throw it up there, or yeah.
Sure.
But maybe I just grab that. Dan, what's in your experience, if you're trying to teach someone to use a PLCnext, and they've got PLC background, right? They understand PLCs, but they've never unboxed and used a PLCnext. What would that in a same integrator? What would they have to expect to spend to get used to that product to be able to?
Yeah, good question, Jeff. I'm gonna go ahead and say what David said earlier. I think it's 80% learning the structure of the software and then 20% implementing. It's a little bit different layout of traditional PLC structure, where we can mix and match different programming languages. We can import different libraries. They're not necessarily built in. OPC is built in, but if you want to use Modbus, you need to go to the store and import that. So usually when we get PLCnext into a customer's hands, we say, hey, give us an hour here, hour there. We'll do some software layouts, some tips and tricks, and we'll get you ready to go. So I think spending that time beforehand, before you start development, is key. Understanding all the features and functionalities and where all the resources are located. So relying heavily on people like myself, I think is huge to expediting your development process. So
I'll add one thing to what Dan was saying and say, like, we were in that position where he shipped us a PLC. We got it the Friday before Integrate Live, and David and I had to figure it out and watched an OPC UA video that by Phoenix Contact about how to connect via UA, and had that up and running in, 30 minutes to an hour. And that included getting it on a public IP address and everything that goes along with making that PLC available to the public. I mean, David, you were in the programming software interface. What was your experience with using it? Because you have you've done some PLC programming.
Yeah, look, I've been in the fortunate position. I have been trained on PLCnext, so it's probably not a fair question to ask.
Okay, fair. I didn't know.
But
gotcha.
Yeah, so that was the cheat.
I think
one thing
go ahead, Zach.
To kind of talk about that win. I mean, we have a lot of different customers next and varying experience, but the majority of people that use PLCnext don't come from the background of PLCnext. They come from, a Rockwell ladder logic background or a Siemens, logic background, and even Codesys too. I mean, there's a lot of Codesys users out there that have come in and started using our platform. And one of the beneficial parts of PLCnext, and I'm going to put on my marketing hat here for a second, is its flexibility, right? So it can kind of be what you want it to be. It's not going to look exactly like, an RS Logix project. I can guarantee you that as someone that's used RS Logix before, my first time in using this, I was like, ooh, all the libraries on the other side of the window. I didn't realize that, it took me 5 minutes to be like, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong. So there are little nuances that you have to get over, but it is pretty straightforward when it comes to, if you've used any modern PLC programming platform, you should be pretty quick to jump in on it, and just those little nuances are the things you have to get over.
So here's a barrier that I see here for what we did, right? The barrier is to Wynn's comment earlier, you're typically not starting with the SAP side, right? You're typically starting at the process side, or you've got something that you want to interact with SAP. And it becomes very complicated to, it's one thing to be able to get the UPC tags up into OPC Router. The thought process of, okay, now I'm going to connect to SAP. I've got this certified connector, but how do I use it, right? And then to understand that to get an SAP resource to help, especially a contractor, that's a big lift, right? That's a very high dollar person. And so what would your recommendation be for somebody who wants to, hey, I want to play with OPC Router. I want to see if I can actually get, my recipes from SAP down to my shop floor. What would their path be? Would that be something they would be able to call Software Toolbox and you'd be able to walk them through it? Do they need to get an SAP resource? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, from our experience, Alan, most users that we talk to have an in-house SAP resource that they involve while we're going through the process. So that typically is, hey, if we're going to call this RFC call, we need someone to create that. We need to know what ins and outputs there are. And honestly, we've never run into a roadblock at that point. We are very upfront with the customers, letting them know that is a piece that I don't want to say Software Toolbox and SAP expert, right? I mean, we're going to help you along the way, but we need the SAP pieces to also be in place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but like I said, most people have a resource that they can involve, and we're very upfront with them about, hey, we need someone on your side who knows the SAP and can put the pieces in place so that it's plug and play.
And we're saying SAP a lot, right? And I get it, but it's not just SAP that OPC Router is enabling, right?
No, we have an ERP connector in general, which does REST connectivity. I mean, that's technically what Ken used to get data into the Canary historian. So, I know that the Canary is not an ERP system, but REST is a common way to interface with the ERP system. So that's why we call it an ERP connector. But it could also be a database or something as well. So.
Okay. And I think we talked about also just database inserts, SQL database as well.
Yeah, stored procedures in databases, updates, stuff like that. Yep.
All right. There was a question that came in over the week between the project last week, and it came in on LinkedIn when I published the virtual workshop to the library on integratelive.com. Henry asked me, and I didn't reply because I thought I'd wait for today. He was asking if the OPC Router middleware has been reconstructed using an open source platform like Node-RED. At first, what I thought he was asking, I misread it and was thinking about it for a while. I was thinking he was asking, is it built on an open source platform like Node-RED? I don't think that's what he's asking. I think what he's actually asking is, hey, couldn't we just build something like this in Node-RED? I'm guessing if the group was to answer that, we'd all say, yeah, sure, you could build this in Node-RED.
You can build a lot of stuff in Node-RED. Yeah, that's true.
Right. I think a lot of people are going to lean more to that free and open source software option, specifically maybe within the community that we're speaking to. All right. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about why you wouldn't build this in Node-RED for this exact use case. Why spending, I think on subscription, it was around just under $4,000 a year for OPC Router for one enterprise seat, for an enterprise version of that, why that should be your path instead of trying to build this in Node-RED for your SAP instance.
Sure. David and I talked about this earlier because we always run into, but this is free and I can use this free thing. I mean, Router's not the first thing we've run into up against free. This happens all the time. There's a couple reasons. One is the total cost of ownership. You can go do this and you can write some scripts in Node-RED. You can make it work. Do you have a long-term resource to upkeep that? What's going to happen in 10 years when that guy's no longer there? The advantage of an off-the-shelf product is the support that backs it. I mean, that really is one of the main reasons why you don't go free, is you have someone you can call when you run into problems. I mean, who do you call when you run into a problem with Node-RED? I mean, you probably post them on a forum and wait for some guy to reply to it. I mean, I'm not sure. That's how a lot of the free stuff is.
That guy is a 10-year-old in his bedroom, by the way.
No, he's not. He's 20 years subject matter expert.
Oh, yeah.
You can trust him.
The other thing that, just let's say this was a critical application for your process and you wanted redundancy. Well, we didn't really get into this with Router, but with redundancy in Router is literally a checkbox, and you put in the IP address of the primary router, and the secondary listens and picks up when it's gone, when the primary is gone. So little things like that really take Router to another level. David, we were talking, he says, well, that's like saying, well, why don't you use a Raspberry Pi versus a PLCnext?
Yeah.
Sure, there might be use cases where the Raspberry Pi works fine, but the resiliency and the scalability and long-term cost of ownership, and just the upfront engineering, right? So I don't know. Yeah. That's my thoughts. David, you have some thoughts too, so I don't want to.
No, I think you've nailed it on the head, and I think just what Router does. I mean, there's no doubt that Node-RED is incredibly powerful, but you've got to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And Node-RED also from my experience, because I've built a few home automation systems using Node-RED, because as a home user, you can't afford to buy anything else. So sorry, Win, I couldn't buy an OPC router to do what I needed to do. But the reality is there's a lot of scripting behind it. So to get from A to B, you've also got to go into the JavaScript kind of environment. And what Router makes it easy, which also speaks to the cost of ownership and maintaining that solution, is that it's a configuration component, fill in the blanks kind of scenario rather than scripting, unless you really need to do scripting. And then those typical industrial or operational technology features, such as the high availability, the redundancy, and even store forward, which can be a feature that can be enabled within Router, just makes it a little bit more focused towards, in my opinion, that reliability requirement that we're used to on the plant floor, and taking that up the stack into the enterprise world.
And just from our side, one of the things we it's not the same thing, but it's kind of the same Pandora's box here of, if there's a free version of something out there, why don't we use it? And with our open message with PLCnext in the first couple of years it was available, we had a lot of people fighting us on it of, it's open, so what can I do with it? And the answer is you do a lot of things with it. Like I had a kid come in that was computer science, and he created a demo where you could do the photo hunt where there's two pictures, and it's, would you use that in a practical application on the shop floor? I mean, I don't think so, but you did it, right? And, we have a lot of users that use Node-RED, that like Node-RED and can use Node-RED, but we've also had a lot of beginners come in and say, hey, I've heard a lot about Node-RED. Can you guys teach me how to use this on this platform? And the answer to that is, to an extent, we can show you how it works, but we don't own Node-RED. I don't, it's just like, I don't own Linux. I can't teach you Linux. Well, I could probably point you in the right direction and give you, some people that can help you and give you, good functional things that we know work and that we use all the time. But it's not our job to teach you how to use something, that you're going to have to support yourself. So it is a balance of, okay, what is possible, which is almost anything now, and then creating these connections with, like Software Toolbox and Canary, the users and the people that create the platforms that are experts in it, that we want to do this, but we also want to do it well, and we want to do it consistently, and we want to be able to do it for a long time. That I think is the key piece here is connecting all these things together, and not just saying, well, yeah, I could do whatever I wanted, which, yeah, you could do whatever you wanted. Is that what you want to do on your shop floor or into your ERP system? I don't think that the ERP people are going to go, yeah, just do whatever you want.
And that's kind of the point that I was waiting for someone to bring up back, is that we've all been on calls before where there's multiple vendors, part of a solution, and something's broke.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That guy.
Right. And I can promise every time you show up on a call with SAP, and the way that you're interacting with SAP is through some home-built solution, whether it's Node-RED or anything else,
You're not going to get support.
They're going to say the problem's there. It's not with it. Like, you almost need them to feel good about what's connecting to them, so that, and I'm not picking on SAP. Ken knows.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You're the same anywhere. You tell me you've got some weird Frankenstein's monster homegrown, built on open source. Like, that's always where the problem's going to be, no matter where the problem is.
Well, I'll give you an example of the way this is kind of a real world example of how this played out for me. We had a very large HMI system, and we were converting to Ignition. And we have been for years dealt with the pain of that exact scenario of, hey, we had an integrator come in. This integrator created some magic for the HMI to do a bunch of stuff, and it was really cool. And every single time that thing didn't work, guess what we had to do? We had to call that integrator back out to work on it. And what happened was we literally paid a guy. And I remember this day, it's literally, we paid him for 2 days to re-engineer the work that he did so he could figure out what he had done 10 years ago. And he took 2 days to figure out his code to fix it. And so when we transitioned to Ignition, We set a foundation, and we said we will by, unless we absolutely have to, will not have custom code in our application. So what did we do? We took our whole team to Inductive every quarter, and we sat down with their engineers and we said, this is what we want. And Travis Cox would bang out a bunch of custom code for us. We'd go back and we would test it. And if it did what we wanted, then we would give it back to Inductive and put it in their queue to put it in their product. And we would not use it until it was in production. And what that does for us is every upgrade, we don't have to worry, oh, is that code going to break? Is this feature going to not work? How are we going to go and touch every single one of these gateways that have that code running in it? And then on top of that, as soon as you get into that phone call with Rockwell and Ignition or Siemens, whoever it is, now I can say, no, Ignition, this is your code. This is your code. This is their code. And you don't get stuck in that, oh yeah, this is, we don't support that.
It works well for a large company with weight. May not work as well for a small manufacturer.
No, but you know what? I agree with that. But at the same time, you just have to set some guardrails in place and make sure that you're thinking about exactly what Wynn talked about, that total cost of ownership. Me doing this feature in code, what's the cost? How am I going to manage it? How am I going to update it if it breaks on an upgrade? You have to think through all those things.
Yeah. And I think that's the real takeaway for the audience on our message here. We're not saying don't build something yourself. Just be aware of the true cost if you try to do that. And in this case, I can guarantee the true cost is more than $3,500 a year to your operation to build that and maintain it. So, there was a project 2 or 3 years ago where, and this was a major renewable deal, millions of tags. And I can remember with my Canary hat on 2 or 3 years ago, them saying, well, it's either going to be Canary or we're going to try to build, or we're going to build this ourselves. And listen, there's databases out there, open source, that you can use for time series, and they elected to build it themselves. Well, it's if I remember correctly, it would have been about $250,000 total is what the spend would have been on Canary for a perpetual solution. And probably at the time, I think we thought it would probably be maybe 30 days of integration work up front to make that work. Well, the open source solution that they went with had no cost. 9 months into the project, with 5 people working on it, they still weren't operational. I can promise that 9 months was more expensive than the upfront license and now I can't even speak to what the long-term cost of that ownership would be for less functionality and but it's a tough road to navigate when you're in it, right? Because you're restricted. Maybe they didn't have CapEx budget for the software. Maybe they had services available.
How many of us have dealt with software that had custom code put into it to make cool features, and then you end up stuck with Windows XP or Windows 7 because you can't upgrade the software, because if you upgrade the software, all your custom code is going to break and your customers are going to hate you. And so you literally just carry Server 2001 and Server 2008 into over and over again. And the lift to upgrade is so expensive.
That's funny.
Yeah. And I mean, the other part here is, when we're talking about PLCs and, the engineers responsible for those PLCs, you're innately talking about custom code. I mean, almost all PLC platforms are based off of somebody programming it to do something, right? There's a specific
proprietary language.
Exactly. And so you almost get a user base that is so used to building things on their own and doing things by themselves and trying to make things work with the tools that they're given, that it's so used to doing that. Like, that is the use case for most PLCs. And you almost have to teach people that it's okay to bring in other partners. It's okay to do things that are not home built. And one of the reasons I think we're seeing a lot larger adoption of PLCnext is the flexibility that I talked about earlier of there's a lot of engineers that have been in industry for 35, 40 years that are coming up on retirement. And not only are they retiring and the workforce is going away, but the knowledge of the things that they've done previously is going away. So all of the code that they've developed, all of the systems that are out there running that they've done over the last 20, 25 years, the knowledge of that is going away as well. So the ability to build in platforms that someone out of college understands, and I'm not saying that, there is no expectation for someone out of college to not know ladder logic. Yeah, I would say if you're coming into this industry, you should probably have an okay background in understanding how that works. But we also have engineers coming in from computer science that, if I'm talking IIoT or getting to the cloud, they already know C++, they already know Python, they know these high-level languages that exist already. And I don't need to build in a structure that doesn't allow me to use that to do the things that I want to do. So you have that custom built in there, but I think the adaptation and what Software Toolbox and Canary are showing here is the flexibility to do the same thing that Phoenix Contact is doing with PLCnext and bridge the gap from what was and to what can be.
I'll take it a step farther than that. I believe that next gen PLC, that Phoenix Contact, the Opto 22, that is going to be our path forward for migration, because we are not going to be able, and this has been proven, we are not going to be able to take a PLC 5 or a Slick 500 that is running a plant of 500-600 tags and upgrade that to, say, a ControlLogix when the cost is, the hardware is not the problem. The problem is I have to rip out all of that IO. I have to put in new hardware, new IO cards. I got to reprogram, retest, revalidate, the whole 9 yards. And you're talking a complete outage, plants down, all that. Where I see the future of us getting a path to actually do PLC migration and bring in a level of security is going to be standing up an MQTT broker in the control room, going to the skid level. So you've got a filter skid. You go to that skid level, you put in a next gen PLC that allows you to tie just the IO of that machine. You publish it to the broker in the control room over the network that's already there. And then you do a small cutover of that filter. You go to the next piece of equipment and you do the next thing. And as you have these micro outages and you're putting in these next gen PLCs, you can go through the entire plant without a full shutdown. And you also are decoupling these things. You're also using pub sub, store forward. You're doing, so you get all the benefits of state and storing forward and the decoupling, and you're going to be able to go back to Jeff's drawing, start using the unified namespace, because now I can have a naming standard at that level. I'm not looking at this giant project. I'm looking at a filter. And so I truly believe that is going to be the path forward. I'll give you just an example of the last company I worked with. We had a multi-year PLC migration project. And company spent $20 million. And out of that $20 million, I think we actually upgraded 3 or 4 PLCs. And they weren't giant plants. One of them was a mid-sized plant, but I'm telling you, the lift to do it is so tremendous if you're going to go in and do migration a traditional way. And that's why this day, every single OT plant has legacy equipment in it. I was working with somebody last week. They're still running Windows 3.1.
Wow.
Yeah.
They have a 3.5 inch drive connected to their computer.
Stack of stuffies.
It's a piece of equipment that will never get built again. It performed one thing. That thing that it performed was very valuable. It is just a rock solid, just keeps running, and the margins are too low to reprogram and rewrite and all that. So you know what they do? They keep Windows 3.1 running.
That's incredible.
And I do see a little bit of a chat going on here with Brian, and I don't want to open up a whole can of worms. And he's saying, he says for non-critical operations, sure, but critical operations, we need to have dedicated hardware. And I agree with him. Hardware is very important when it comes to critical infrastructure. But I would also say that if you just go and search out OPAS, OPAF, and what they're doing for the open process automation side of things, they're trying to get away from dedicated vendor-specific hardware. And the reason is what Alan is talking about right now is they don't want to have something that's sitting, Brian, open the worms. They don't want to have something that's sitting there that's 25 years old that is the parts or the components inside of it do not get made anymore. And that is propping up a plant. You know what I mean? They don't want a piece of wood that is holding together an entire structure that at some point that wood is going to crumble and break and rot to the point where it's not usable anymore. And there's nothing that can go through with it. So I would say that the work is being done, Brian. It certainly, we're not there yet to where I can say, yeah, just go out, you can use whatever hardware you want, it's done. But the OPAS, OPAF initiative is paving the way for that critical infrastructure to be more hardware agnostic and to be open to multiple different vendors working together and not just one specific SIS platform or SIF out there doing one function that is vendor specific. So it's happening right now.
Hey, let's talk about Docker just a little bit. It's something that that we were looking at using on the project. We didn't end up using it, but PLCnext supports Docker. Could have OPC Router can be containerized. Canary's working towards that? Not working towards that?
Getting close. Still not there
close. Yet. Yeah. But what could have happened, let's just fast forward to
OPC Router has Docker support for 64-bit.
Okay. So if the hardware, if PLCnext has the hardware specs, right, what we could be looking at in a few short months even is that same solution all just running on PLCnext, OPC Router running on PLCnext, Canary's logger, right, sitting on PLCnext, and then IT is just managing that Docker, and every time there's another instance of this, they've got their image that they deploy, and you kind of got that new best world scenario, right? What you're describing, Alan, essentially, this is my skid. Here's the software I need to run on my skid, and when it's time to do a cutover, I just deploy this image.
There's a couple other features that are interesting as you start talking about Docker and you start thinking about PLCnext and Opto22 as they move also into that Docker realm of being able to run these containers on these PLCs. Tenable OT has now a Docker that you can deploy at the PLC level. Well, now you're going to get true packet inspection and IDS and IPS, and you're going to start getting a much more extreme security level at the source, right? So instead of having to put in a sensor that's going to run Tenable OT, now you just put it right on the PLC.
Right.
Checkpoint has Harmony. Harmony runs on a Docker. You can deploy Harmony, which does a very similar thing at the source and start getting those levels of security. And so as we move into this kind of next gen PLC, and we start to have these capabilities to be able to run some of these tools that are going to benefit us for remote access, for security, for all these different things that are critical for allowing people access to this data, right? I mean, there's vendors out there that will say, hey, it's going to cost you, $1 million a year to a big manufacturing site for support. But if you give us direct access to the equipment, it'll be $100,000. And we can, right? So because the otherwise they have to send a person on a plane to the site, right? And it's a massive lift. Whereas, hey, you give us access and we'll support you, and it'll be, a tenth of the cost. And how do you do that with a legacy PLC, right?
Right.
You give them access to everything. You give somebody access to a control logic that's running multiple LANs because they have multiple Ethernet cards. Well, now you've just given them east-west flow that they can hop that backplane and start going across your network.
Yep. And I think I have a bingo card going of all the buzzwords I'm going to use, right? Is, this dovetails right into IT OT convergence, right? And there'll be people saying that IT and OT will never converge, the OT will never give it up. And what I say to those people is, I'm glad you feel that way. It's happening. Like,
yeah, it's done.
Go talk to your IT department.
It's done.
The IT department, it's happening. It's not happening. You need to be ready for it. So Docker is a perfect use case of saying, okay, IT is going to push something out. I need to be, ready with what I'm doing, and on the plant side, make sure that I can get these out to all of my units. That's what Docker is. Like, why not embrace that kind of thing? And then we have new security standards coming in from Europe that are really going to change the way that anything with an Ethernet port or a USB port gets manufactured, and requirements that are coming. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that we could have of, what does it look like 5 years from now when you can't buy legacy systems because they physically aren't allowed to be manufactured because they cannot get a CE marking without following certain standards that are required from, a security standpoint. And
you mean I'm not going to be able to buy my 520 PLC controller off of eBay anymore?
I mean, you might be able to buy it on eBay, but
you can't
your
use
mileage
it.
may vary on that.
Regulatory reasons, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the only place you'll be able to get it, because
it is the only place you can get it, by the way, because we bought some.
Yeah, but that is the future, and that is it. You can't sit with your hands over your eyes and your ears and your mouth and say it's just not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to my plant. It's happening. It's happening, and if you don't have an IT person, that's probably the only way it's not happening, is if you don't have IT in your facility. If you don't have IT in your facility, then the question's probably moot, because you're probably not connecting to anything, or you're already at risk and probably already under control by somebody else, an external actor at this point. So sorry to hit the panic button on everybody that's watching this, but that is the reality of the situation we live in. It is happening right now, whether you want to believe it or not.
I could go deep into security. I'll restrain myself, but one thing I will say is what we see a trend in, especially in the OT space, is there is a tremendous amount of vendors that have IIoT applications that their whole marketing strategy is, you don't need IT. Put this gateway, stick it out in your OT space, connect these devices, and then go to this website and we'll show you the data. Well, what'd you do? You just created a shadow IT department that is taking the data, not putting it back to your company. You're paying somebody else to store and feed that back to you. And it's happening all the time.
Yeah. And it's completely against the actual concept that we're recommending with a UAF, right? At the end of the day, why on earth? The only reason someone goes down that path is because they don't feel they have the technical capability.
Oh, no, because they don't work well with IT, and they're like, I don't even want to call IT. You say you can do this without IT? Put it in.
Yeah, that's scary. That's a scary idea.
Oh, it's happening. It's rampant.
Guys, we're in the wrap-up phase. We haven't talked about my favorite subject. Did anybody see the Chat GPT 4?
I did. I've used it
yesterday.
I used it today.
Who watched the video? So I'm going to reference something from the video. Okay, Zach.
I watched the video.
Yeah. Did you happen to notice the bonsai tree in that video?
In the guy's office area that was using it?
Yeah.
I did not look at it.
Okay.
I was staring at the screen trying to figure out what he was typing.
Fair enough. All I gotta say is, as a guy who's kind of like started to recently researching it into bonsai, OpenAI's got like $100,000 bonsai tree sitting there in their lobby, like talking about ultimate flex that we've made
Yeah.
it. We've got, we're doing okay. I was
Nice.
blown away by ChatGPT, but more so the bonsai. So who's used ChatGPT 4 already?
I have.
Okay.
They won't let me in.
They won't. Okay. Yeah, I haven't.
I
won't let
haven't. They won't let me in.
Who won't let you in?
I haven't. I just watched the thing yesterday, and I was just exploring how to get access to GPT-4 this morning. So,
All right.
So can I give you an example of how I have used it very effectively?
did you summarize a sentence into using all cues to start the word?
No. So I'll give you I'll try to summarize it. So for 2 years as an operational technology architect, we brought in a company, Peter Harding. Thank you.
Yep.
We brought Peter Harding's company in, and the whole mindset around Peter's co-piloting is you go find your best engineer and you sit him down with a data scientist, and then they take that cognitive knowledge of that engineer and they plug it into an AI model. And then that AI model can start to duplicate what that engineer does, right? Well, that's all ChatGPT is. So if you think about ChatGPT, the way you think about it is it's a child that has an incredible reach of information. And you have to train ChatGPT just like you would train any model. And so the way you start using ChatGPT is you will tell it, I want you to act like this, security director, a senior programmer, whatever, and I want you to write a summary of whatever it is you're going to try to work on, and then you have to give it the inputs. Use these inputs and then have it write a summary. It won't be right. You take the summary and you keep working that summary until the model learns how to respond in the summary that's appropriate. Once you get the model corrected and you got it right, now you can start to ask it, okay, give me the key components of this. Give me the details of this key component. And before you know it, it will pump out a tremendous amount of data for you that is exceptional. But you have to do the work to train that every time, right? And so it's an amazing tool. It's so impactful if you use it correctly. And I find it interesting that people in the business environment have one or two responses to it. Oh, it's a shiny little toy. People play with it. I had it redo a statement or whatever. Or then there's the other people who are actually leveraging it to make their job incredibly efficient.
Well, Alan, while you were doing that, I took your LinkedIn bio and your LinkedIn experience background, and I uploaded it and I provided it to ChatGPT, and I said, this is Alan Ray's background. Give me 2 sentences and incorporate a dad joke about him professionally. And it says Alan Ray's experience in automation has taken him from oil and gas to co-founding Integrate Live. But his dad jokes are still stuck in the past. Did you hear about the oil rig that was afraid of the ocean? It had well-founded fears.
You know what I'm going to do, Jeff? I'm going to change my username to nobody. That way, when I like something, it will say, nobody likes this.
Nice. David is not sold out on ChatGPT yet. He was groaning quietly and politely.
I'll get there.
It's not there yet for sure. But hey, it's exciting technology. It's exciting to see where it goes. It's if you're, we can't rely on it for. We tried to incorporate ChatGPT for data correlation, and we found that very quickly it's not accurate. So we can't use it yet. But maybe one day, or now that we have competition, right? There's competition's going to only drive it further. Hey, we're over an hour. Let's go ahead and start to wrap up. Ken, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you did. If people want to get a hold of you or learn more about Canary, what's the best path for that?
CanaryLabs.com.
CanaryLabs.com.
Or reach out on LinkedIn, or email me at Wyant, WYANT, at CanaryLabs.com. So
there it is. All right. Dan and Zach on the Phoenix Contact PLCnext side. We talked before, there's distribution model. They can look to the website to get the distribution. But what if they just have some questions and want to understand a little bit more? How should somebody do that?
So I would say the first place to go is the PLCnext community. So PLCnext-community.net. There's a ton of information on there. PLCnext.help is another great place to go for information on looking at our how everything works internally and how you can get connected. But the community is a fantastic place to ask questions, to look at already developers corner. We have a whole corner of things that have been done. And there are question and answer areas there that you can interface with.
Awesome. Thank you. And Software Toolbox.
Yeah.
How do I learn about all of the different products and all of the expertise that your team has?
Well, I mean, our website has a lot of that information, but sometimes it's easier just to have a call and chat with a human. So you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can call the office number and ask for Win or David, and either of us can be available to have that chat with you. When you have a lot of products like us, sometimes multiple products fit an application, and it's good to go over the pros and cons and try to see which one might be the best fit based on your very specific requirements. So,
okay. And I always like to clarify, because I think it's important. You're here to support integrators and make their projects more successful. You're here to support end users and make their projects more successful. You don't compete against integrators. You help provide even more deeper skill around data connectivity to integration firms as well as end users.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome.
I still love the example or the analogy of being a data plumber.
Yep.
Love it.
That's great. And Alan, how do we track you and your adventures in Tajikistan? LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'll still be working. I'm going over to watch my grandkids while my son-in-law goes to Turkey and has some medical stuff done. So,
okay.
So
my day will start at 5 p.m. and it will end at midnight.
Oof,
wow. And you think you can work and watch multiple grandkids at once?
Yeah, my grandkids are older, so I'm taking new controllers and new switches, and so they're covered. They're good.
So you have a different babysitter. Yeah.
Well, they're gonna have all day with me, and then at 5 p.m. they're gonna have to figure out how to entertain themselves.
All right. Well, safe travels, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I'll just conclude by saying, people are always surprised to learn that I have a police record. But, I've always been a fan of Sting. So what am I going to do? Thanks for joining us on Integrate Live, The Rundown. And we will talk to you next month on our next virtual workshop. Thanks, everybody.